When comparing other Titans in the Monsterverse, one of the most heatedly talked about Titans is easily Monsterverse's iteration of Mechagodzilla, due to just how debatable it actually is. Unlike other eras where it's actually pretty simple, for example the Heisei era, it's pretty simple. He's on Godzilla's level at the time in 1992, but gets eclipsed by other stronger foes in the Heisei era. But for Mechagodzilla, it might not actually follow this trend of monsters growing more powerful as the time goes on, like the two other films did, with Ghidorah obviously being stronger than the Mutos. Let's see how powerful he actually is when comparing other Titans to him. No wank, no bias, no bullshit, and no severe downplaying either, because there's ends for both of this. Some people genuinely think Mecha caps at like 50% Kong level or the Dominion Titan levels, and some people think he's like top 3, so take that as you will. We're going to be doing an unbiased and finally see just how powerful or how weak Mecha actually is. We're going to go top from the bottom, because this How Strong video is going to be a little different. Instead of just kind of going through the films to see, oh yeah, they did this and that, and kind of giving a more analytical approach, we're kind of be going through a gauntlet to just see what tier of Titans he would range from, since he only really has one scene to talk about and a plethora of statements and such. So I can't really make a full video just dissecting the whole Hong Kong fight, can I? No. Well, obviously the fight's going to be mentioned like heavily, where I'm going to be more comparing him to other Titans directly to get a true grasp of how strong he is, since it's kind of hard to get a grasp of his strength by just that single scene alone, since that's all he has. So obviously when it comes to Godzilla, Shimo, and Ghidorah, they are above the mech. At the very least, the designer thinks a base 21 Goji would beat the mech, who isn't full power and is stated consistently that he's just not as powerful as he was in 2019, for example.
Just gone a couple rounds with Kong. I mean, Godzilla's pretty tired. I mean, he hasn't had a chance to really slow down this entire movie. I mean, presumably he's been swimming around and, going nuts in the ocean when he's not on screen, and so...
And Godzilla is the strongest thing at the time, regardless, is unstoppable, again, including the mech, meaning he is just directly stronger than the mech in his 2021 self.
Was going to dispatch Godzilla in the same way that Godzilla killed the Muto in the first film by blowing an atomic breath down his throat. In retrospect, I think it's probably the only way just about that I can imagine Godzilla actually going down, because his skin is impenetrable. I think the only way you can get in there is blow his guts out, and I think Mechagodzilla was really close to doing it.
And the Godzilla, all things considered, even in this 50% state, once again below 50% actually, since he was already below 100% in the start of the film, and almost this year he's half power compared to the start of the film itself, he would be below 50%. If I had to give a proper quantification, I'd say between 30 and 40, but there is no specifics, so we just have to say below 50. And he comes out of the fight with no significant injuries. He gets a burn, sure, but it goes away. He only debatably gets some bruises or scratch marks, which not that impressive, all things considered, on a weaker than 50% Godzilla, as it's directly said that Mecha can't really kill Godzilla. He can't drill through his skin, even in this weakened state. The only way Mecha could have killed Godzilla was through the proton scream, which is even debatable if it worked.
Yeah, so I think that maybe he could have taken Godzilla out here. I don't know. I mean, it seems at least plausible in an interesting way. Nice little throwback. Basically, I think Mechagodzilla comes close. I think maybe if he had blown that red beam down his throat, Muto style, that would have done him up. But potentially, who knows? We don't know what Godzilla's insides are made of. I mean, it might be just as strong. So who knows?
And it's even directly stated in their fight, in their initial clash, and it's also visually shown, that Godzilla overpowers the mech in their physical struggle, and the mech never does this again, implying that even now Godzilla is still physically relative to the mech when it just comes to brute strength.
The two giants collide, sending the robot staggering.
And we also know their beam clash, the proton scream, Mecha's strongest weapon, was stalemated by Godzilla's weakened atomic breath.
Godzilla lifts his head up and blasts out his blue atomic breath at his foe. Mechagodzilla counters with his red beam, and the two glowing rays meet in the air between them. The robot rears back and amplifies his ray, knocking Godzilla to the ground, and leaving the reptilian titan's chest glowing and smoldering.
Which, to be fair, sure, this atomic breath is compared to the Hollow Earth drilling feat, but that just makes that feat more so a casual display of Godzilla's power than Mecha actually being compared to the atomic breath's full power. Because we visually see on screen a weaker atomic breath stalemating the proton scream, and we also just flat out noted to Adam that normally Godzilla would have won the beam clash. While some people try to argue the semantic of the statement, the very obvious implication is that Godzilla would have won this beam clash, or at the very least not lost it, which would kind of debunk Mecha's beam being stronger than it regardless, so it doesn't really matter what interpretation you use. Godzilla could also physically move around the Mech in this state, literally dragging its whole body, and obviously Ghidorah and Shimo just have better showings on the same Godzilla, who even at 50% is still relative to the Mech when it comes to brute strength, and maybe even a bit stronger than it, all things considered. Considering Ghidorah could box up and go relative to the nuke-amped Godzilla, who's obviously much stronger than a form of Godzilla who's already much stronger than a form of Godzilla who's much stronger than a form of Godzilla who scales to the Mech. More or less full power 21, who is just stronger than Mecha outright. Or Shimo, who's able to box up evolved Godzilla, who, once again, is stronger than a Godzilla, who's stronger than a Godzilla, who's stronger than a Godzilla, who is stronger than Mechagodzilla. And even Ghidorah and Shimo literally just have direct statements saying they would just beat the Mech. Like, according to Kong, Shima's just the strongest thing he's ever seen, who has seen the Mech, by the way. And Ghidorah just has statements, even as of 2021, that he's just the strongest thing ever, aside with Godzilla. He's still just the strongest thing, and nothing can come close to him, even referencing things like Kong in this statement. And actually, in the novel, it's just directly stated too, that what the fuck was this new weapon gonna do if Godzilla proved he's alpha? This just means that amped or base Godzilla, or these two characters in this tier, would pretty easily just overpower the Mech easily. Doesn't matter how many weapons he has, they would brute force and just rip the Mech to shreds. But now we need to get to a lower tier of power to actually quantify how weak or how strong the Mech would actually is, since we already just determined he's not on that tier of a Godzilla tier opponent. He's objectively less strong than Godzilla. He's not like Ghidorah or Shimo, who is on par with, if not stronger than, a lot of forms of Godzilla, where Mech is weaker than most forms of Godzilla, as we just discussed. But, so let's go to characters like Muto Prime, Evolved Tiamat, GXK Mothra, and Full Arsenal Kong. These are all characters who have varying levels of degree of relativity to Godzilla. Muto Prime being a Titan that directly fights and does pretty well against an Aftershock Godzilla, which Muto Prime is already implied to be above a 2021 Godzilla, but a current Kong as well. Aftershock Godzilla essentially being a slightly weaker base Godzilla, all things considered. And since we already know Muto Prime is above 2021 Goji, Muto Prime is simply too strong for the Mech to handle, considering he scales and is likely stronger than versions of Godzilla who are stronger than Mechagodzilla. And this is backed up considering we know that the scream he has would just shatter the Mech's dorsal plates as well, due to them being similar to Godzilla's. So it's not that far-fetched to say the Muto Prime would win against a Mech without that much struggle. Evolved Tiamat is a Titan that can wrestle through and cut through the skin of a power plant GXK Godzilla, a supercharged peak version of his base form, who is obviously above the much weaker G21, who is above the Mech. Right, people who complain that Evo Tiamat got one shot by the breath, even if you want to use statement that the charged axe amps the breath, there's no indication that a weakened atomic breath charging the axe that sliced through the Mech like butter, being wielded by a weakened Kong, who would obviously be putting less force into his strikes than a normal Kong or even a GXK Kong, should therefore just mean that the Mech just literally can't take strikes from the atomic breath either. Doesn't matter that the axe is more concentrated, which it isn't, by the way, especially since energy beams are already meant to be highly concentrated. And we're comparing this to Tiamat, who was in a direct prolonged blast of a supercharged atomic breath, obviously much different from the weaker atomic breath being wielded by a weakened opponent. Mothra is very simple. If you think her knocking down Evolve and Shimo, and her taking Shimo's breath means she just has relativity to them, then she would just beat Mechagodzilla. It's kind of simple. I mean, having scaling to Evolve and Shimo is a lot better than anything Mecha has. So, but if you think it's just like lifting strength or something, then yeah, the mech would win, I guess. Maybe the mech could like exploit her weakness to fire, since we know Mothra doesn't really like fire, as she was significantly stronger than Rodan at the time. But Rodan's fire kind of made her have trouble to fly, so it kind of gave him an inherent advantage over her. So maybe things like the missiles or Proton Scream, if it hit, could work. Though then again, Mothra could react to Shimo's beam, who should be comparable if not faster than the Proton Scream itself, so doesn't really matter, does it? Kong is very interesting. Obviously, if the charged axe we visibly see on screen, he would shred Mech to pieces. But what about without it? I guess we have to go over Kong's fight with Mechagodzilla. Like Godzilla, he is half strength, Kong arguably being even weaker than half strength, just like Godzilla, as some statements imply. He was out of shape and not in the prime at the start of his film. So he might just be weaker than half, just like 2021 was, compared to say like Kingdom Kong or GXK, where he got stronger or was in his prime. Now I know some people will bring up that the fact that the Mecha was holding back or he didn't get all of his energy. First thing, straight up, Mecha had all of his energy. It's flat out shown on the scanners and in novel. Anyone who says otherwise is just making bullshit headcanon. Secondly, the Mech was not holding back, as we know, but something to consider is that just because he's not using some weapons doesn't mean that he's holding back. It doesn't really decrease his durability or attack potency or anything significant. Like, people will complain that he didn't use like the fucking missiles, which I don't care. It's the fucking missiles. What is it gonna fucking do? It's a missile that Kong can block and react to. Same thing with the Proton Scream. Kong has similar reaction needed to what Godzilla reacts to the Proton Scream would require, as the Proton Scream is a laser, and Kong has reactions that would get him into those FTL ranges, so it's not that big to say that Kong is able to react to the Proton Scream for anyone who thinks that. And while a novel statement does imply that a base mecha is stronger than Kong, with several other statements saying similar things, and we know that the tail drill can kill a base Kong, and the Proton Scream scales to Godzilla's beam to a degree, which could kill Kong at the time, doesn't make sense with what's shown in the film, is the problem. As it's most likely just referring to the weakened Kong, all these statements, and we see in the film, Kong objectively gave trouble to the mech in this weakened state. He blocks and catches strikes, he takes hit from the plasma kick, he held off his tail for a good like a minute, he sweeps the mech on its ass, and the art book backs up the sentiment that he was just overpowering the mech, and Kong just has no wounds from the mech. He shows no damage from anything the mech does. Well, obviously the mech was stronger than Kong at this time and would have killed him. Just the fact that this weaker Kong is physically relative to the mech and can physically contend with it kind of leads to the conclusion that a much stronger Kong should be able to physically match or at least, if not just overpower the mech. So you just add consistently, even if Godzilla was holding back, Kong does much better against a stronger Godzilla than the one the mech was facing, especially in the Evolve fight, where even at the least interpretation, he's affecting Evolved, which is a lot better than the mech can do, who can't even pierce the skin of a weaker Godzilla, as we do know, when Godzilla gets weaker, his durability does get lessened, as comparing his base against his Dominion form, Godzilla can pierce it in Dominion, yet a stronger Godzilla can't pierce a stronger Godzilla's skin. But once again, I don't really think Kong is nearly on the same tier as Evolved, but the fact that Kong is not instantly dying, either way, is still above anything the mech can do. And just don't even get me started on the Beast Glove, which is just directly stated to be above the mech, and it is not made from mech tech. The art book directly states that it's from like a Moltech, I think is the term, and it's tech able to take hits from Godzilla, which is consistent on screen. And some people try to argue, oh, the art book isn't valid, yada yada yada. Like, no, it's valid. It's showing objectively what the Beast Glove is. It's not like showing things that weren't in the film. It's just showing what was in the film. just showing what the Beast Glove is. And people will try to say the novel has more validity, which, no, the novel has equal amount of contradiction to the film. Why are we acting like the novel is this almighty source, when the art book, honestly, probably has more validity than the novel, if we're being honest? And Mecha is not doing a thing to that glove. Let's get that straight. A glove that's able to take hits from Shimo and be fine? Yeah, no, Mecha's not doing shit to that glove, and the glove is gonna put a hole through the mech. And considering Kong's own reactions, as we said before, he should easily be able to kind of react to the proton stream or tail, even if they could kill Kong, just dodging, blocking it, grabbing it, and just ripping it off the mech. So with all his weapons, he just easily makes a fool out of the mech. No debate, he just beats up the mech, he rips it apart. But like base maybe would be a bit more contentious, so even though I just think the fact that Kong is doing anything to the mech at all in a less than 50% state, and the fact that even like his durability can take strikes from a stronger Godzilla, yeah, no, that's a lot more impressive than what the mech does, unironically. Scar I'll just throw in, and Scar could actually make Kong bleed with his kicks and could give him some trouble. And Scar should also be much faster than the mech, since Kong is comparable to the mech in speed in a 50% state, and a full power Kong is getting leaped around by Scar King. So I'd honestly say Scar King could win, if I'm being honest. I get if you say the mech wins, but I think Scar King could do it. I think Scar King has much better scaling to Kong. I think harming Kong in GXK is a lot better than struggling with a half-powered Kong, I'm gonna be honest. So even the mech would just lose in this tier of power, like characters who can like harm and fight Godzilla, but obviously aren't on the same tier as him, or characters in the same tier as his ant forms, I guess to be more specific. So let's just go into a weaker part. Dominion Titans, the Mutos, Ion Dragon, Shinomura, Rodan, that type of stuff. Mecha should be above the Dominion Titans. Even the Godzilla mech beat up is stronger than the dying Godzilla who's on his deathbed, who could just pretty much beat up all the Dominion Titans while holding back, except for Tiamat, but even then, Mech still just beats up a stronger Godzilla than the one Tiamat was fighting at the time. So and considering even like a weakened Kong arguably has statements of being above, these Dominion Titans that can fight evolved Tiamat, or a weaker version of evolved Tiamat, then yeah, this makes sense. The Iron Dragon, also an easy win. While he fights a Godzilla stronger than the mech, he doesn't do anything. He only gets damages on Godzilla's weak points, aka his gills, which shouldn't indicate he fully scales. I think that's kind of weird. It's like saying Lex Luthor scales to Superman because he has Kryptonite Blast. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Rodan is all simple. If you think Rodan for some reason significantly harmed Ghidorah according to these statements in their fight,
Rodan lands on Monster Zero and digs in its talons.
Then sure. If not, then mech wins. Also, same thing if applies if you think Evo Mothra didn't get stronger, and it's like the same Mothra, and therefore Rodan would just scale, and then you think Evo Mothra has these impressive feats, then sure, Rodan would win. But other than that, no, nothing really. Mutos and Shinomura are interesting. Mutos do a lot more damage to Godzilla than Mecha did, though it is an EMP nerf Godzilla, but their speed is not that impressive, which, while Mecha's base speed is not that impressive either, being slower than Godzilla. His boosters, he can outpace Godzilla to the point where he can almost kind of blitz him in this weakened state, and he's likely much faster than the Mutos, and his proton scheme should also be much faster than Mutos, meaning he could maybe just range fan, even if the Mutos could maybe physically tear into him. I think the EMP nerf Godzilla is likely stronger than half-powered Godzilla. Nothing really concrete to compare the two. But I don't know. I don't think getting nerfed by an EMP and maybe being a little tired is comparable to like fighting for 12 hours straight, exerting all your energy, and like drilling to the earth as well. Like, I don't know, man. There's nothing really comparing it. I think the Muto as a duo could effectively take on the mech and tear it to shreds and just get it off guard. But maybe individually, I think the mech would win. Shinomura is similar. Shinomura can somewhat wrestle and make Awakening Goji bleed, but gets one shot by the atomic breath. Physical damage doesn't do much to the Shinomura just because of its regenerative properties, but the proton scheme is right there and an easy win con. And the mech, once again, is just much faster. that's mostly it for all the relevant Titans. I didn't mention things that aren't as relevant or things that are kind of self-explanatory, I guess. Or Titans obviously weaker than this group, but also obviously lose. No real needed for explanation, but that's it. I hope this answers your questions on Mechagodzilla, so I know he's a very hotly debated topic in the Monsterverse fandom. So please, if you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and hey, follow for more. Peace.